Well, greetings and welcome to the reboot of Naked with Dr. Money. I'm Dr. Stephanie Ardrey, known as Dr. Money, and I'm sharing with you today a 30-year journey of mindset development to return to mission elevation. So I'm so happy that you joined me today as I shared this milestone. You see, today is very significant for me. It was 30 years ago that life dealt me a blow that I didn't think that I'd recover from, frankly, to be honest with you. I don't know if you've ever experienced life giving you a sucker punch and you feel like, you know what, this time I'm down, I'm going to stay down, I'm going to be counted out. 30 years ago, I had that kind of life kick in the gut. And as I decided carefully to pack up my talents and to retreat from the work I had been doing, to give you a context, I was a young entrepreneur. I was a CEO of a business that I had created and formed into a joint venture. So we were a $250 million backed JV in the space of advertising and marketing communications. I was on the forefront of multiculturalism, telling corporations and sharing with them the importance of multiculturalism before that was a thing. So many of you don't know life without that, but believe it or not, historically, many things that you experience weren't there, didn't exist. And we're told that they were crazy, that the persons leading them were weird, didn't make sense. But yet again, those things that I led then have proven repeatedly to be true as I continue to lead. But before I could lead again, I realized 30 years ago when I was hit with that hurtful blow uh, that I needed to pull myself off of the field, if you will, the playing field, and that I needed to spend some time in silence to begin to figure out what was going to be next for me. So for me, what happened 30 years ago was my then mother, 48 years old, um, took a nap, had a brain aneurysm, and died. And it wasn't just the loss of my mother, because we all have relationships with our parents. It was because my mother had become my safe space as I continued to advance my business. You see, there was a time that being a young entrepreneur wanting to create a multi-billion dollar global business for a young Black woman was considered insane, weird. You know, they gave me every name you can imagine. You know, my grandmother told me that I should spend more time trying to get a husband than focused on building a business. Um, she even used stronger words when I decided to expand my fledgling business from the Bay Area to Los Angeles, you know, and some of those words hurt. But that was the beginning of the journey. The journey. I had to learn how to receive harsh words, how to heal from them, and how to dust my butt off and get back in the race. Thankfully, somewhere along the journey, I knew that um, it was God guiding me from the beginning. And I had gratitude because for some reason, as a young child, I knew. You know, my grandmother used to say that she knew when my mother was pregnant, 18 years young, during her senior high school year, her final year of high school, she conceived me. And she graduated in June. I was born in August of that year. She turned 18 in May. And my grandmother said, my mother's mom said that there was something significant about me, that there was going to be a movie made about my life that she knew, and that she insisted that I be born in a private hospital with a private doctor because she wanted the world to know that she knew. And she described that as, and this again, the context was a time where people had babies at home. People had just started going to hospitals. So, having your baby at a hospital or at home, it could have been a viable option. But she said, no, it was important that I know that she knew that there was something more to me. And so she insisted that I be under the care of a private physician who would carefully care for me. And when she shared this with my mom to tell my dad's mom said that my grandmother was insane and that I could be born anywhere like anybody else. And so my grandmother decided to use her insurance policies to finance it because she would not be deterred in her decision. And so, sure enough, I was born in Berkeley, California, under the care of a private physician. And it became something that was important in our family. My family, my cousins, other people teased me along the way, saying that they brought the wrong baby from the hospital because I was poised from the beginning. I was proper. I was different. I was different than anyone they had ever experienced. I relate that difference now to possibly having different sets of genes, you see. Something unique about both my parents, I later learned. My father was the kid that had one dad, different from his other siblings. So he had a mystery dad. And my mother was the kid who had a father different from her other siblings. She too had a mystery father. And somehow or another, I think the DNA of these mystery fathers contributed to my differences in the family. Maybe that was the nurturing part of what made me, and then the nurturing part followed. But today, again, I'm rebooting Naked with Dr. Money, which was my attempt to pull back the curtain and share with people. You see, I'm in the wellness business. I'm a real estate developer by profession, business innovation entrepreneur. And in honor of my mom's early death, and then soon after my father's early death, I just set out to create my next business as a global business that I had stopped, if you will, building at the time of her passing. I took a pause and decided to sow into myself the development of the talents necessary to launch this business, but also because following my mother's passing, I became pregnant with my own son, Sterling. Sterling turned 29 yesterday. It was just about a year exactly to the date of my mom's passing that his young life took form and manifested. In fact, I had an emergency C-section on the evening of the 22nd after 20 something hours of hard labor. And so more about Sterling later, except I'll share that he was the why that I needed to make a very critical decision 30 years ago when I found myself at an intersection, what I call a fork in the road. A fork in the road is where you find yourself in an experience, you're traveling along, and you only have one or two options. You can either go left or you can go right. That's your only choice. To me, that emotional fork in the road was I could self destruct through my hurt, or I could opt for a path forward to healing. And what I'm saying is anybody that has experienced death of a significant figure in their lives, you lost your husband, you lost your mother, you lost your father, you lost your child to an unexpected death, the devastation that you probably experienced. You went through a major business failure or some other disaster or disruption, or you suffered a major disease. Any of these D's, as I like to call them, can cross your path along the journey. And at the moment that you face whatever your D is, you find yourself at what I call an emotional fork in the road. I opted to heal, but it wasn't an easy journey. Several times along that healing journey, I thought somehow or another I was lost, or that I had made the wrong decision, or maybe I'd made a mistake. Maybe I just didn't understand. But what I learned over the 30 years is that mission elevation is about returning to the alignment, to the seeds that have been planted within you by God. It's your God given assignment. And the other thing that I came to realize and accept is that God gives you an assignment and only communicates with you during times of silence. You have to be quiet so that you can hear the guidance. And you also have to be able to discern, is this God's guidance, or is this a distraction or something attempting to take me off of task? Which is it? So along the journey, when you begin to walk the walk and do the daily work, you begin to develop the mental muscles that allow you to increase your ability to discern which is which, what is what, the distinction between when God is talking to you and when distractions are attempting to capture your attention and take you off of task. So, 30 years ago, I began to dig deep. The transition began with, um, as I mentioned, the acknowledgement of the child within the womb, my son Sterling. And it's interesting because there's a lot of things along the journey that morph through um, kind of signals at the time, sometimes signals that I didn't understand. I remember my mother died in January, of course, and by May, she would have turned 49. And because I expected that day to be possibly a challenging day, I decided to plan the day to do something that typically brought me joy, and that was advising businesses. So I remember spending that day with Bernadette Williams, who at the time we were really close friends, spending a lot of time together. Bernadette came over to my apartment and we spent the day strategizing and working on business. And that business allowed us to, again, distract me from what I would have been thinking about, which missing my mother was one of those things that I probably would have been thinking about. I possibly would have been sad. And this way, I was certain that I wasn't sad. I was in my happy place. And then as she left that evening, I remember receiving a call from my son's father and realizing that something was happening. I wasn't sure what was happening, but something was happening. And I told him that I felt weird and that I needed to check into it and determine what was going on. And that once I did that, that I would get back with him and, tell him what I had discovered through this investigation. So anyway, Sterling became the why, right? But what I did was I also made the decision, I set an intention that to bring forth this baby. And since the baby had to, as Sterling likes to say, share a body, right? I realized the importance of what I experienced and how that could impact the baby, right? That's what we talk about. Is it nature or is it how the baby was nurtured? I believed in the womb experience. It was something my grandmother had shared with me, and it was just something that I believed. I remember as a young person, I wanted to help change humanity when I would see things on the news. And I remember coming up with this great idea that the best way I could impact change was if I got all of the women while they were pregnant and I educated them, then I would be educating the mom and the baby at the same time. And that would allow change to evolve in a more rapid manner. Because if you try to change the child, but you didn't change the parents who are nurturing the child, then they would be barriers for the child to pursue evolution. You know, when we talk about, which we will talk about, what contributes to emotional trauma, most people experience emotional trauma from that womb experience to 18 years of age. Something happens within that timeline. And whatever happens is then what influences what becomes trauma later, especially if healing doesn't happen. And oftentimes there's no way for healing to happen because there's no vocabulary to describe the emotional trauma or to put it in a proper context. It's different if it's physical trauma. If you break your arm, we see that that's a physical manifestation. So we go through this process of what it takes to heal a broken arm. But when a person's spirit is broken, that's not visible at first. It's visible, but not visible at first to the typical untrained mind, untrained person. And so that's what this journey of pulling back the curtain or pulling up the layers of the onion to share is all about, because I realized that mindset is the foundation of it all. You know, over this journey, I think so many of the sayings that people shared began to really take meaning. I know you've heard the saying, is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? The glass has the same amount of liquid in it. It's just a matter of the perspective. If the person sees the glass as half empty, then they focus on that emptiness, and that's what they manifest. If the person sees the glass as half full, they too focus on that half fullness, and that's what they manifest. So it's two sides of the same coin. And it's also what we say, what I understand is where God gives us free will. We have free will around the mindset that we choose to adopt and deploy. But the facts of the talents that He's bestowed within each of us, that doesn't change. Whether you bury your talents or develop them, it doesn't change. The talents are still there. The life you experience is based upon your acknowledgement of those talents and your doing the work, right? Thank you to Dr. Myron Golden. We haven't met in person, but I appreciate you for being my virtual coach during this last part of this journey. Not last, but part of the journey that I needed to make the leap to leave my home country and come to a new country and begin again creating. I needed someone to feed me, and I appreciate you for sharing so much of your content and encouraging me to share my content as well. Because you're right, somebody wants to hear my story. somebody is suffering, possibly in silence, looking for a safe space to heal. And that was difficult to find. I found along the way many people who, hurting people, hurt people, right? They know no better. So I got a lot of hurts along the way, and I still opted to suck it up and to heal in spite of the hurts. Sometimes I wanted to hurt back, but I realized that because I didn't want to sow that into the experiences with my beautiful, brilliant boy, my sunshine Sterling, that it caused me to really protect not only my mental environment, but to guard our physical environment as well, because I didn't want to pass on hurt to my beautiful, brilliant sunshine. And so when I realized that mindset really does contribute to that beautiful baby that's in the womb, to its mindset, because mindset also determines how your body reacts, how your cells perform. Every day your body creates brand new cells. And depending upon your mindset, those cells either come in full of energy and vitality to live, or they come in to die. They atrophy because of your mindset. There is a cause and effect. Your mental creates the physical manifestation. And so you have to question which comes first. Is it outside in, or is it inside out? It can be either or. You get to determine which it is and which it'll be, and which one you lean into. I chose, by taking on the task, to do the work and to develop the mental muscles necessary to have better discernment, to be able to engage with people again, and to recognize that the people who were quick to hurt had nothing to do with me, had everything to do with them revealing who they are. A lot of times that's the problem. We go along this journey interacting with people, and we think that we are causing their behavior, not realizing that they're living their own story, their own Groundhog Day. We just happen to be objects that cross the path, either at a good or a bad time. So depending upon when we cross that path, that may influence the experience. And what we have to recognize is when someone is behaving a certain way, we can't take their behavior and suddenly adopt it as something that has anything to do with us. We can't, but we do. If you're talking to a loved one and they say something hurtful, you think, wow, that means X. And because that means X, then you began to behave according to Y. What if that didn't mean X? What if they said what they said, but what they said was more about an outward expression of what they internally are experiencing or were experiencing? And it really didn't have anything to do with you. They're projecting what they see themselves into a conversation with you that don't even have anything to do with you. But you don't know that. Transparency is what allows one to begin to see that. We begin to separate what we see in terms as facts from what we've made those facts mean, and therefore have caused them to be our truth. Truth doesn't change. Truth is. What we make that truth mean can change. And the circumstances within which we encounter that truth can change. And therefore, what we do with it can change. And so when you have the information and the tools that you have handy at the time that you encounter that truth, then it informs everything. It informs what you see, it informs what you believe, and then it informs the behavior, and it informs whether you have breakdowns or breakthroughs. That's what it is. Your beliefs either foster barriers, which lead you to breakdowns, or they foster bridges that take you to breakthroughs. But it all begins with your beliefs, and those beliefs are informed by your mindset. What have you chosen to believe? Early along the journey, a few things I chose to believe about me. I knew for sure that I loved to learn, and I didn't need anybody else to tell me how to learn. I had started teaching myself early. My grandmother taught me the importance of teaching yourself. She had less than, they say, a third grade education, but our house was filled with books, even a set of legal code books that my uncle had gotten from somewhere, which is so ironic because my mother's mother had less than a third grade education, while my father's mother ended up becoming one of the first Black women attorneys in the state of California. Although she didn't practice law, she became a teacher. So I had that legal mind, not understanding, and lo and behold, the house that I was first nurtured in, I had a set of legal code books that I read on my own, reading about corporations. I wasn't older than 8 years old because at 8, that's when my mom bought our house and we moved to our own home. So it was during those formative years of 0 to 8. Thankfully, continued at my grandmother's house through 11, through finishing elementary school, coming back and forth. But it was during that time that I was reading the law books. So yes, now I have a law degree myself. Not surprising. I guess that was part of the plan. But what I realized along this journey is I loved to learn. And as kids, we played games. I loved to dance. My grandmother said she put me in the high chair and I would be dancing. I came from a musical family. My uncle had a recording deal, and so I learned about music. They're all kind of famous musicians, many I don't remember at this point, but who were said to have spent time at my grandmother's house when I was an infant. But I love to dance. I still dance at home, at night, in my room, before I go to sleep. I put on a favorite playlist and I probably dance for a good hour or so to wind down before I prepare for sleep. It just makes me happy and it allows me to release any stress that I've taken on from the day. It's my favorite outlet and it's the favorite way that I love on me. Consequently, my son Sterling loves to dance. He's a brilliant performer. It's in the DNA. And the other thing that I loved was I loved playing business. Being an only child up until I was about 9, I had time that I spent by myself. And I would use my dolls for my customers. I had Monopoly money as my money. I had the calculator. I knew 10 key by touch before I knew what that meant. You know, I would spend hours and hours playing business. And again, these were the things that fascinated me. I was a young violinist. I played violin. I performed, and I was part of, Brownie, Girl Scout cheerleader, and graduated elementary school as my class valedictorian. I remember being coached by the principal on my graduation presentation. My classmates were envious of why I got to leave class early to go to the principal's office, so many days leading up to this presentation. He was coaching me and preparing me to recite 50 Years by James Weldon Johnson, which I did just as he had. I remember having the outline where he had stronger here, lighter here. I mean, he coached me on how to give what I didn't know at that time would become the first of many such presentations that would anchor my journey. It was my principal in elementary school who first taught me how to properly prepare to make a presentation. And I'm forever grateful for those humble beginnings. But anyway, the point of the journey was that mindset, mindset. And each time I had an experience, recognizing that if the experience didn't produce the desired outcome, what could I learn from that experience that might inform how I approach whatever it is I'm seeking to produce as an outcome differently, and see if I could do a course correction to ultimately accomplish the outcome. What I have learned in this journey is that it's that attitude that fosters the growth and the development of your talents. You see, God has planted your talents, those seeds, within you. And you can be sure that God planted them when it's something that you are inclined to do that is natural to you, but you're inclined to do it for the benefit of somebody's greater than you. If you're just thinking about yourself, that might not be God's assignment. But if you've taken on a challenge to solve a problem for the benefit of someone else, that might be the indication that that's part of God's assignment for you. Or at least it's a season for your growth and development that will move you towards the ability to actually fall into alignment with God's assignment for your life. So, because this is my first day back with Naked with Dr. Money, I have prepared an outline of some of the topics that I'm going to share with you along this journey. I'm going to share with you several sets of frameworks that I've created, because what I've done is I took the healing journey and codified reliable methodologies that can be repeated. And in repeating them, they can be practiced and learned. And when you practice and learn these methodologies, you can produce your desired outcomes. So I'm going to be launching my series on the 6 M's to me. Remember that me is mindset elevation. I'm going to talk about mind chatter. I'm going to talk about memories. I'm going to talk about meanings. I'm going to talk about motivations, having a methodology, manifestation. I'm going to talk about mindset elevation and what that looks and feels like. I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've put together in these various frameworks. I'm going to share with you the thought leaders that I follow. I mentioned Dr. Myron Golden, Dr. Dispenza, Dr. Berg, Dr. Gabor Mate, Eckhart Tolle, Joel Osteen, Brene Brown, Byron Katie. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. As I told you, I love to learn, so I have a deep library of learning, and I continue to learn every day. There's a new opportunity to learn. So you'll find me constantly taking in new content around mindset, um, exercise, muscle development, so that I could maintain but continue to contribute to the mission elevation that's in alignment with my God-given assignment. So somebody's out there listening, and maybe today you are facing what I was facing 30 years ago. I, for a moment, wasn't sure if I wanted to live any longer. I wasn't sure. And at that time, I couldn't imagine today. I couldn't imagine today. I couldn't imagine being able to be in a place authentically happy again, overjoyed, overjoyed, and blessed beyond measure. I couldn't imagine that. I thought that 30 years ago, the only direction for me was down. And so if you have just faced death, divorce, disruption, disappointment, disaster, any of those D's, please let me be your guide. Let me be your guide. Let me be your mentor. Let me help you heal the hurt so that you too can fall back into alignment with your God-given assignment. I promise you, I promise you, I can hold your hand and I'll get you there, right? Because in my assignments, I have accepted two things. One, God told me to be their light. Be their light. So to bring my light wherever I go. And I promise to do that every day. Second thing that God told me is that my healing would continue. You see, you're not ever healed, I don't think, because I think there's little micro hurts that you experience that re-trigger some of the wounds. But what happens is, as you develop more muscle, those little triggers don't hurt as much. In fact, sometimes those triggers don't even matter anymore because your mission has elevated, your mindset has developed, right? So the last part of this journey is an ongoing journey, and that is to heal. And God shared clearly with me that as I accept my assignments to heal others, He will continue to help me with my healing. Myron Golden says this, that you have to be and do in order to have. The doing, using what I'm being to heal others, will allow me to have the physical manifestations of the desires of my heart, of stewardship, to be able to sow at scale into others. But I realize not everybody is interested in this message. It's only a select few. And that select few who look for sacred spaces for healing, I got you. You're going to be very interested in my wellness resorts. You're going to be very glad that I didn't quit, that I took the challenge to dust my butt back off and get back in the race. And I tell you, so am I. So am I. So am I. I'm so honored that God gave me this assignment and that the journey that I've had to grow along, that even through the hurts, and I mean, there were times I cried myself to sleep. I thought I was the biggest crybaby. I said, I cry so much, I don't know, I don't have any more tears. But I'm telling you, I'm telling you, telling you. Do the work. Healing is possible. Healing is possible. And it's worth it. And it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. So let me be your coach. Let me be your guide as we continue to develop the muscles necessary for our mindset to be able to allow us to take the responsibility for the missions that we're supposed to elevate. So I'll see you again soon. I'm Dr. Stephanie Ardrey, known as Dr. Money, and thank you so much for sharing your time with me. I'll see you soon.